Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff I Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio. And welcome to another edition of Happy Hour. I have to admit, I'm a little thrown because my days are just so off. And so, but anyway, we're recording this on a day. I'm just confused. But anyway, if you are drinking or whatever you're choosing to do, please do so responsibly. These are just times to wind down. Samantha, are you sipping on anything? Are you doing it responsibly?
I'm being responsible with some bubbly water because I'm already sleepy. I can't stop yawning. I'm like, not sure what's happening. Maybe it's at the mid-afternoon, moment where everything feels like it's crashing.
Yeah. We are recording later than we normally record. That is true.
But yeah, so I'm keeping responsible with some water. Getting myself hydrated like a hydrated queen.
Nice.
Thank you.
I've got my red wine.
Yes.
I'm very excited about it. All right. So this is going to be a quick update episode, I think, on just me being ace. Because if you're listening to this chronologically, you haven't heard the episode yet, but we did a wonderful interview with Allison Raskin, who has written a lot of books about mental health and romance and relationships, and has a romantic comedy book coming out, and has just done a lot. She's done a lot in that space. And I have to say, when I was preparing for that interview, I got very nervous because I realize I still get nervous. Like, if it'll come up, like, people don't believe I'm asexual, or they don't believe it's a thing, or if I'll doubt everything I know about myself. Because I've said I feel really comfortable in that identity now. People who know me have accepted it generally, and the people who don't, I don't really care about, and that's a whole other thing. But I just want to say, she was, in her books, she even had a whole section that was like, no, I can't speak to this experience. That's not what this is about. But acknowledging it existed. And it was just really relieving. But because I was so relieved, I was shocked at how nervous I was that I would get to some point in the book and I would be like, oh no. Which can be we do vet everybody who comes on here, but sometimes you can't know completely for sure. Just again to say, she was fabulous, and I wish I had put at the top that she recognized that, or just some kind of acknowledgement that she recognized that. But it made me stop and think, wow, I'm still very insecure in some ways about it. And it was also fascinating that I read her two of her books before we did the interview, and they are all about all of the facets of romantic relationships. There's some stuff about, platonic relationships or business relationships as well. But it was both validating and kind of like shocking how much I was like, wow, this is not my experience at all. This is not what I was experiencing at all. And so it made me feel like, okay, yes, you were this whole time. And she's very clear in it. Like, she's very clear. Not everybody experiences romance the same way. That's kind of the whole thing. But just in the general vibe, I was like, nope. That was not what I was feeling. That's not what I was going through. Me. And it, like I said, it did kind of made me feel a little validated, because it's like, okay, yes, that was not me. It also made me feel a little guilty because I think I assumed in some instances that I understood why people were reacting the way they were. And I don't think I did. I don't think I did at all. And I thought that I knew that, but it was really eye-opening to me to read it and be like, okay, so in this past relationship, I was perhaps really misinterpreting this whole thing. And not just on a relationship level, but on, I don't even understand that level almost. I was having all these, like, I say in the episode, I cried. I felt both seen and like I wish I had seen other people in my life. Because I didn't, that's just not how I experience the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to. That was the other thing that made me kind of sad when I read it, is that I wanted to so badly. And I remember in high school just trying so hard. And I even kind of made myself very sexual at one point because I felt so asexual that I was like, I'm going overboard so no one will question me. But I just didn't feel it, and I was trying really hard to. And so it was a strange experience reading it where I just, it was eye-opening, but it was also a reminder of how isolated I felt in some ways, of like trying to fit in some ways. And the interview went long, which you will hear. And there was a question I had that said, if we have time, I would love to talk about this. And hopefully we can have Allison back and we can talk about it. But she had a whole thing in there about just that really illustrated to me kind of some differences about breakups and the need to be in a relationship, or the very much wanting to be in a relationship versus me. And it was just so different. And it was very, because she was saying like she's felt guilt for basically being shamed for wanting to be in a relationship as if she's not an independent woman. And I was like, I've felt the exact opposite shame of I'm not in one and don't want to be in one. And it's sort of a damned if you do, damned if you don't. So I would love to have that conversation with her. But it was really, it made me think about a lot of stuff. And like I said, I feel very confident in it now, but I was so nervous that it would come up and be like, that's not a real identity, or there's something wrong with you, or you need to go get something checked out, and none of that happened. It was all me. It was all me doing this, to be 100% clear. But I don't know. I still am going, still learning, still trying to go through this.
I think it's interesting when it comes to trying to figure out what the norm is. And again, we've talked about tropes and expectations as adults, or growing to be an adult, and our ideals as teenagers to becoming that adult. And we really have to navigate what that means to us, because I did not get into dating and relationships until I was in my late 20s. And I didn't have like much of relationships till I was in my 30s, mid 30s. And that was all thanks in part to online dating, because for me to meet people was really hard. I don't know why. It just was for me. And then like my current relationship was because we live near each other, and it just happened that way. We built a relationship that way. But like I was with you in that same manner of like, I'm not normal. Why am I not dating? Why am I not seeing tons of people? I've never been in a deep, committed, long relationship. College, and never dated people at all. Somewhat religious background as well. But like, it also made me feel stunted. And I was like, this is all my attachment issues and trauma and all these things. And then growing older, then like watching everybody who was going through some good relationships, but a lot more bad relationships, that I was like, I'm good. And people, like, so many people going through divorces, and I'm like, I'm even better now. I'm good. And then having children and having a really messy divorce. And not that children are a problem, because I love children. I actually really think they're so sweet and cute. And I love hanging out with really like cute children. I raised some for a while, but like at this point, I'm like, yeah, no, this is not for me. This has never been for me. And I've gotten old enough that I don't care enough about other people's opinions of that. And also the people in my life have seen the bad versions of that, if that makes sense. Like they've watched, like, their children going through divorce, or they've gone through horrible divorces or really messy stuff. And they're like, yeah, no, don't do it if you don't want to. If that's not something absolutely that you want, don't do it. And it's kind of one of those, like, in hindsight, I'm feel grateful that I didn't have to go through that. But definitely during those times, I felt as if I was so abnormal and so weird and that unlovable. I thought I was unlovable. And that feels like it's such a curse in these things, and then growing into, oh no, that was okay. I'm actually okay not having experienced all of that until I was older and felt a little more secure about myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's one of the things we talk about in this upcoming episode, is that realization of I'm okay, but I still want XYZ, or maybe I don't want XYZ. And this is something that I have long thought, but that whole idea of finding the relationship that's going to fix you,
right?
I just don't think that's a healthy thing. I think it's fair to say a good relationship, you're going to help each other,
right,
or whoever is involved. But I don't think you should be looking for, this will fix me,
right,
personally.
Right. That's kind of what I've come to discover being in this long-term relationship that I've been in. It's enjoyable. I enjoy his company, and we had to wade through some really tough conversations. We don't necessarily fight a lot. We don't do like the dramatic up and downs, which I'm really grateful for, because I am a non-confrontational person. I have discovered this. Very non-confrontational until I blow up, and then I blow up. Like, it just is one of those. And I'm like, I don't like those moments. I don't want those moments. And you see all these relationships where they talk about if there's not passion and fighting. And I'm like,
oh yeah.
I don't think you understand what that is compared to like how exhausting that can be and how emotionally draining that can be for most people. And that a lot of the times finding friendship and comfort, but also finding the boundaries of like, he's not my whole world. I can live without him. I know that I can. Like, I've done it. But at the same time, he makes it better, or the partner makes it better. Yeah. That's the difference. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And the fact that we don't drive each other crazy. Every now and again, we have moments with each other. I know he can complain about me and I can complain about him. But then in the end, it's kind of like also funny. Like, if I couldn't laugh at my own stuff and his stuff, then I think that's where we have a problem. But again, like, we're still, as much as we're together, we're still very separate. Like, we have so many separate things that I feel like works for us. It's kind of like that conversation about people who sleep in different bedrooms, and everybody's like, oh my God, there is no norm. Like, when I think when you start breaking that, you start finding yourself and finding out that it doesn't, like, maybe you were meant to be in a relationship. It's wonderful, but it's not your typical. You might sleep in separate bedrooms and it works wonderfully because you have your own space that you need. Like, for a lot of people, they need that. And it's a beautiful thing. But for some people, they don't need that. And that's also a beautiful thing. Some people need weddings or want weddings and marriages and the togetherness. Well, that's wonderful. Like, I think one of the things about that interview we had was like, we had three different distinct people in this moment. Like, she knew she wanted to be married. And I think that's amazing. And I love that. But like, she also had to work through what that meant for her and her identity, and realizing that shouldn't be her whole identity. Like, she loves it as a part of who she is in her life, but it's not what makes her. For me, that's not my part of my identity, but I do enjoy my relationship. And this is wonderful. And I don't know how, like, I hope it lasts forever. That would be wonderful forever, my forever, as in like until I die. But if it doesn't, I'll be okay. He'll be okay. You know, like it'll be painful and all those things in any other relationships. And I feel like there's no regret in our relationship. Where we're at is wonderful. You know, and for her, that's like when she talked about, yeah, it's spoiler alert, some rough patches in her previous relationships, you know? And then that's for you too. It's like a lot of things that took you a minute to figure out, oh, but I don't need this. And if I did, it wouldn't look like this. And that's wonderful. Because then that's when you're like, huh, this feels easier.
Yeah. You know, the interesting thing too was nothing is a monolith. There are plenty of asexual people who have relationships, who are married. So this is very much my personal experience, I want to say. And I'm not even like writing that out for now. It looks unlikely right now, but I'm not even like, you know, saying it's not a possibility. But I did have a conversation with somebody who is friends with someone else who's asexual, and she was kind of asking me these questions that it was a little funny because it was like, I'm not the authority on what asexual looks like, but what she was telling me was so different. Like this person she was describing, I'm like, oh, that is not my experience at all. So that's fascinating too. Like the fact that there are all these ways these things can manifest. And of course, for me, I'm like, if that's how she is, that's how she is. Like, I don't know her. It's just, it's hard when you want to find the camaraderie, but you also don't want to exclude people. Like, I don't want to make anybody feel like, oh, that's not what asexuality is. Because that's wrong. That's wrong. It's completely wrong. But that also brings me to another point that I think I'll talk about more in depth later. But even at like pride events, I get nervous that I'll get dismissed, or people be like, oh, that's not what this is. And that's not what it should be. That's not how it should be.
And I mean, this is why it's a spectrum. Like everything's very much yourself related, your own past, your own reactions, what you're comfortable with, and that's the way it should be. And I think the problem for years has been that it's been argued that this is the way it's supposed to be, and this is a rigidity. And like even people who turfs, like that's that same level of conversation that's on there, that they're like, no, I as a lesbian will not allow a trans woman to come in here and talk, like, or I as a straight woman, or I as a woman in general, like this, and just like in forgetting what this is and why these movements were important to begin with, why feminism was important to begin with. It wasn't just, it is for voting, it is for the basic human rights, but basic human rights meaning you become who you truly are.
Yeah. It's just it's something I'm still thinking about and working through. And I know a lot of us are. I don't even think that's necessarily relegated to, when it comes to relationships, at least, to ace people. But also, I want to be clear, I feel like a lot of the things I'm talking about, people before me have experienced forever. So I acknowledge that. It was just really interesting to read this book and be like, okay, wow, this is not lining up with how I.
When it comes to identity and trying to fit in, it does feel really difficult when it's like, that's what is it?
Yeah.
Oh, and then you start asking a lot of questions, but again, but the mature part is realizing, oh, but that's different experiences. And we may come to a similar conclusion, but we had different paths. And that's what makes this wonderful, in that we are human.
Yeah, I'm really glad I read it. I'm really happy. I feel like I understand some things a little bit better. I won't delay in texting back as much.
Oh, oh no.
I'm only semi-kidding. There was a thing in there about it.
I'm really bad about it, so I'm like, oh.
Samantha. But yeah, I'm glad that I know this other experience that is not mine better. Because I thought I did, because you see it all the time in media. But of course, media gets it wrong very often, or has a fun take on it, which is fine. But if you start to take that as reality,
right, and that's the problem, especially because when you see that in, like, not necessarily books, but like when we see it in like TVs and such, it's also from a perspective of someone who probably have never experienced it either, and has assumptions.
Yes, exactly. And then we take on those assumptions, and then they become what we think this is how this thing should look like. But yeah, it was nice. Sometimes it's a really nice part of this job. Sometimes it's a painful part of this job. But to know that your mind can still be, I'm still absorbing information, and I'm still like, okay, let me think about this. Okay, that's a new thing for me. All right. So yes, thank you, listeners. Thank you, Samantha, for joining me on the word salad about my thoughts after reading this book. But I had a lot of thoughts about it. And you will hear the episode with Allison soon, unless you listen to this out of order, and you might have already heard it. Don't know. Could be either. Could be either. But yes, in the meantime, if you have any thoughts about this, if you would like to contact us, you can. You can email us at hello@stuffwenevertoldyou.com. You can also find us on Blue Sky at Bombstuff Podcast, or on Instagram and TikTok at Stuff I'll Never Told You. We're also on YouTube. We have a TeePublic store, and we have a book you can get wherever you get your books. Thanks as always to our super producer Christina, our executive producer Maya, and our contributor Joey.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff I Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.